Gabriella is one of our teacher consultants, so we're happy to see her here.
So the context for, we're going to do a little bit of just obviously contextualization of what we're calling make cycles, which is part of the title of this talk, using our classes as the example. So Peter and I routinely teach a course that's called Reading Literature for Future Teachers and a course called Advanced Composition for Future Teachers, which is a pretty common course on every campus. But Peter and I have been involved for quite a while with an organization out of UC Irvine that also talks about connected learning and connected learning principles, and this idea of make cycles comes out of some of their work. And another way you could think of it is just units of study in some ways, only it has an element, because it's got make in the title, an element of actually making things. And so our students, we kind of do some parallel play in our teaching. So I teach a fully online section right now of one of those courses, and Peter teaches a face-to-face section. And our students share their work together on a G+ community. We work entirely out of the learning management system. It's a long story. We're allergic to it. We don't like it. And so they share all their work that they're doing in the shared G+ and commenting each other's work across our classes. Google+ community. So
it's Google's social network.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's our.
Thanks for asking.
The email system for students at Chico State is all run. It looks like it's through Chico State, but it's really run by Google, so they have access to all those things. So they don't have to make new accounts or do anything.
And we'll show you a little bit what it looked like aesthetically, what it looks like. But Google Drive, Google Docs, Google Classroom, G+ is one of those things in that list of stuff that Google offers. Yeah. And so we end these make cycles, 2-week make cycles, with students making things, artifacts, based on the ideas that we've been working with in any given 2-week cycle. We work a lot right now. I don't know if I would say some of you in this room must know Katie Woodbray's work, because she's been around a long time. But this newest book called About the Authors, especially for those of you who teach elementary school, it is full of the most amazing little kid writing you'd ever want to see. It just gets our students very excited about teaching writing with little kids. And so we have a bunch of her quotes as part of kind of our context, because she is so in line with some of the way Peter and I think about what students are doing when they're trying to learn how to be writers. And one of the things that we really hold close is that students should have more opportunity to make decisions about the things they compose and write. So if you think about in school, typically, we control everything. Here's the prompt, here's the reading, here's when it's due. I want you to hand it in on a piece of paper with 12-point font. I want you to post it in Google Docs. I want you to share it in a G+ community. Like, we control every aspect of student composing, typically, and Peter and I are trying to open up possibilities for where students can make the hard decisions that writers are asked to make all the time. What do I want to say? Who do I want to say it to? And given those things, what kind of a thing might this piece be? A letter? A website? I don't know. What's the thing you need to create given what you want to say and who you want to say it to? And then how do you have control over the materials in which you make that thing? So that's a big part driving our energy.
I would just add that we really love the students that are in our programs, but a lot of them want to be teachers because they were so good at school, right? And so they're absolutely happy to be compliant with things. And so we try to make them a little bit uncomfortable by doing this, because we remind them that when they actually become teachers, they have to make decisions all the time.
Yeah.
And they're hard decisions, and they're fast decisions, and they're, it's part of it just becomes part of your DNA. And so we want them to experience that, the kind of, the way that it sort of pushes you off level, but also is really exhilarating when you realize that you have the agency to do things that are powerful and interesting and engaging.
Yeah. So right now, these are what our make cycles would look like. This would be a title of our make cycles, and we basically take the Common Core standards and we turn those into 2-week intense study on things like storytelling, expository writing, argumentative writing, multimodal composing. Even though neither of us, and I'll bet a lot of people, most of the people in the room, don't ever think of those things as that tidy. I don't think there's anything that's truly only expository or only ever storytelling or only ever argument. And so we talk to students about that too, the ways in which these kinds of modes weave through all kinds of assignments. And just to show you a little bit, this would be the website where, and we have links to all these things in our slides, which we'll share. They go in every week to a make cycle and have instructions for, in this case, we just finished a storytelling unit, some reading they're going to do, and some mentor texts, which we want to talk about that we do. So I'm going to scroll down here. So the routine of the make cycle would be 1 week reading in this book and thinking about frameworks and writing about that, and the second week looking at mentor texts that pull out some of those elements, like storytelling, and then making something at the end of that 2 week. Repeat. Read about the authors, write about that, think about mentor texts for expository writing, make. And we just repeat that in an every 2 week kind of cycle so that the routines kind of help. Yeah.
And what happens is that, as Kim was alluding to, the sort of tidiness of the standards, saying that we're going to teach you now to write a narrative.
Yeah.
And now we can forget about that, and we'll write about exposition, and now we'll put that to the side and say, now we're going to write an opinion or an argument. That when we look at what real writers are doing, those things are always intermixed.
Yeah.
They are never neat and tidy. So the best argumentative pieces you see always will have some story that they're telling as well. And they'll also be providing information to us and using those things in very strategic ways to help us to maybe change our thinking about an idea.
Yeah.
So we acknowledge the way that it's constructed in the standards, but we also want students to realize the sort of complexity of it in the way that it intermixes and just is a little bit of a jumble. But we do it sort of in a sequential way so that they see that they can draw upon these different elements depending on their purpose, their audience, and their task.
What they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So we're going to walk you through in a minute, like a mini version of the make cycle is what we're thinking. And this is what a G+ community would look like. I highly recommend, by the way, just aesthetically, the students get pretty excited because they can so easily see each other's work, and they end up giving feedback 10 deep. They get very engaged with each other's work. The work is then semi-public. Public to us, not public to the world, but each week, at the end of each make cycle, we have students who are featured curators, and they take all those makes and highlight 6 or 7 of them that we want to feature on the main site and get kind of blasted out to the public. And over the course of a semester, most students will get their work featured at some point, in the course of that unit. So, yeah. I'm going to put us back into our present. So I think, do you want to say anything about that, or I want to just move to lists.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that one of the activities that our students do, and this is just part of introducing them to professional reading. Many of them have never actually had a textbook that's like Katie Wood Ray's and Lisa Cleveland's text because they say this doesn't sound at all like a textbook. It's not, and I said it's not a textbook. It's a professional book for teachers in the classroom. They're like, okay. And I said, so you're not actually the audience yet, but. So what do you notice? And so they always are gathering quotes and things. And so the quotes that are showing up are things that our students have identified as important things that they've seen in this book. Yeah. So they like this notion of having that agency, right? So when students are given a story starter or a journal prompt each day, they don't come to see themselves as people who need ideas for writing. Yeah. And part of a thing that I've been trying to help them understand is that the more that they can identify with a particular disciplinary practice, the better they're going to be at teaching it because they're people who do the thing, right? And so my students have to keep writing notebooks, and I have one in my, I keep a writing notebook with me all the time, and I have a pen with me all the time. I have my students do that, and I make them like just, twice over the weekend, pretend that you're a writer and pay attention to things that are going around you and write them in your notebook. And so they're starting to adopt that kind of persona of somebody who doesn't need that extra element sort of imposed upon them, but they're starting to embody it themselves.
Yeah.
And that's really what the project of this textbook is to help students be able to do that as well. So part of becoming someone who has some agency is to have things to write about, and part of that is just like asking people to make lists. And so on a screen or on a piece of paper or something, we'd love you to make a list of things or objects in your life that you think are unappreciated or at least underappreciated. Okay? So these could be things that are in your classroom. Okay? These could be things that are in your home. These could be things that are on your commute that you pass by every day somehow. And it might be like something that's like really lovely, but you only see it going 65 on a freeway or something. Yeah. This comes out of us looking at some poetry by William Carlos Williams, an American Imagist poet who paid attention to things that people oftentimes ignored. He wrote poems about things like wheelbarrows in farmyards or glass in an alleyway or things like that. So see if you can come up with a list.
Yeah, and when I was trying this list myself, I was things like I underappreciated are my glasses, and if those of you who've had to move to Cheaters in your 50s know that these live everywhere in your house, and I never can find them, and there's 22 pairs of them lying around everywhere. And so I was trying to make my list of like, what are all the things that I totally take for granted? Like, I need these kind of thing. So, and we'll make lists with you, but we're just gonna take a few minutes and just try to make a list that we can use later to write from. We'd like to invite you to turn to someone near you and share your lists. So what'd you put on your list and why? Why'd you put it on there?
So we hate to interrupt your conversations, but we're going to do it. We hope you all came up with something on your list. Anybody have anything that they want to share? Like, anyone want to share their list?
I hope somebody does.
Yes.
I want to share one only because,
Yeah.
I mean, I have things in each category, but the one that even I thought, why don't I appreciate more is the cross lady during my commute.
The crosswalk person. Yeah, the person that
The crossing guard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody else.
Yeah, there were more over here. Yeah. Yeah.
So this is I made two lists, one for everybody else that they should appreciate more, and my own things that I need to remember to appreciate: time, laughter, relationships, moments, wind, momentum, and open doors.
That's like a poem. That's like a list poem. Someone else? Yeah, over here.
Recently, our coffee pot at home broke. And we
The
had an
gas.
old one that is taking its place until we decide what kind we were going to buy. And it's old. It doesn't have the automatic shut off. And so my husband and I are constantly calling each other, did you shut off the coffee pot? And the other night, I came home and I heard this click, click. The coffee pot was on all day, just burning that coffee. You could smell it when you came in. But it's something that we've taken for granted, that the coffee pot will shut off by itself and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's
And now
good.
it's gone.
That's good. That's a whole story. That's a kid's story right there. Yeah. One more. Are you good? Yep. Good.
I was talking about my bedroom, and I was basically saying I don't appreciate the space that I have no longer.
No, I miss it. Yeah, it's awesome. I liked your open shelf. Is that what you call it? Shelf space, underappreciated shelf space. Like, oh, yeah, that's good. Too many books. So we just did this with the students in our class around storytelling, and Peter came up with a really nice list that's about 15 different categories for the students. And we tell them just set a timer for like a minute or two and get as many ideas out as you can. And the lists were things like your bucket list, things you're afraid of, things you take to a desert, some of the common, like what you take to a deserted island. And then when they have all these lists, we ask them to go back and kind of pick a couple that they think would make good fodder for a story that they could tell, and then they created stories this week around those kinds of lists. And once we make the lists, we tend to then move to showing them some mentor texts. And this last week we read The Dot, Alexander and the Horrible No Good Very Bad Day, and something else that I can't remember now, but some ideas for stories. You probably use something else in your storytelling.
We use them. Yeah, we have overlap, and we have separate things. So we were looking at story structure things. So we were looking at some stories like I am the cat, I am the dog, to look at like seesaw structures. So alternating perspectives, doing some things like that.
Yeah.
We were reading some. So if you noticed, I mean, when Kim showed you the Google Plus community, some of you might have been looking at them and going like, wow, they're writing in second person. That's a bad thing. You're not supposed to write in second person. But one of the mentor texts we read was a Dave Eggers short story called Accident, where he writes it entirely in second person. And so that was the thing they were invited to try, to see sort of what happens when you do that.
Yeah.
So.
And we borrow, or at least I do, I think we both do, mentor texts. There's a really good book by Lynn Dorfman and Rose Capelli. And in our links, at the end of these slides, you can find a link to actually an interview with them on the National Writing Project site and links to this book. And they have another one, too, that's mentor text for nonfiction texts, but a really good resource. As a college teacher, I find this to be a really good resource, even though it says K6 on it. It's actually a really helpful way to how you walk through students through how to notice and read like a writer. How do you read things in the world and read them for what those texts are doing from a writer perspective, not from a what's the idea perspective. So links to that are on the site.
And there are many other really good texts. So The Writing Thief comes to mind as a really good text that identifies particular like sort of narrative patterns or argumentative patterns or things like that, and then always has children's books as mentor texts for those things.
Yeah.
So the idea is helping for us is to help the future teachers in our classroom see the utility of children's books beyond being a thing that entertains students after class, or after lunch or something, which is often the way that they imagine the role of reading to their students. So so they need to like sort of learn some things about the profession. So this helps us.
And so what they'll do, they'll take something like The Dot, which if you don't know, I'd highly recommend, anything by Peter Reynolds, The Dot or Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, and that we'll say, what do you notice? What do you notice? And they'll say things like, oh, really interesting use of italics as a way to do emphasis in this text, or oh, what a really interesting repeating pattern that this author uses. Maybe I'll use a repeating pattern in my story. Oh, really interesting content. This seems to be about being grumpy. So grumpiness might be an interesting thing I could play with in my story. So we'll just say, what do you notice that these authors do? Where's the craft element in these stories? And then how might you use them in your own, when you go to write your own thing? And so we're going to ask you to do that with argument today. And so we're going to use some mentor texts that are little kids' books that are great for teaching argument. And then we'll kind of think through together, like, what are the elements of this text, and invite you to use those in your own stories. And Peter even made you little books that you could use to make your story. So yeah.
So again, along with the notion of embodying an identity as a writer and having that as a way of understanding that you have agency, this is the other real key component of this writing class that we have, which is helping these future teachers understand what it means to read like a writer. So that you read not just to be entertained, but you're always reading to look for craft, for structure, for writers' moves, the kinds of things that writers are doing. And the way that we really think about mentoring in three ways. That text can provide we can use mentoring in three ways. So one can be the texts themselves can mentor us. They can show us ways to communicate that are effective. But we can also study the writers and find videos of them talking about their processes, so they can help us understand the ways that they come up with ideas or the ways that they craft their ideas, the kinds of things that happens that between them having an idea and getting a book written. And there was a third one, and I just blanked on it completely.
For
I
the
apologize.
form, for the craft. Yeah, for the craft. Want to read I Want a Iguana?
Yeah. So we're going to share with you one of the mentor texts that we use, and we're going to read it sort of in chorus fashion.
You ready?
I think I need
You have to get
I think I need my iPad.
We're too
to,
old.
Yeah, I know.
All of us are too old, right? I can't read the thing anymore. How many of you know this book? Yeah. Yeah. I Want a Iguana.
Yes, this is I Want a Iguana.
Yeah.
So it's written in letters. Dear Mom, I know you don't think I should have Mikey Gulligan's baby iguana when he moves, but here's why I should. If I don't take it, he goes to Stinky, and Stinky's dog Lurch will eat it. You don't want that to happen, do you? Signed, your sensitive son, Alex.
Dear Alex, I'm glad you're so compassionate, but I doubt that Stinky's mother will let Lurch get into the iguana's cage. Nice try, though. Love, Mom.
Dear Mom, did you know that iguanas are really quiet? And they're cute, too. I think they are much cuter than hamsters. Love, your adorable son, Alex.
Dear Alex, tarantulas are quiet, too, but I wouldn't want one as a pet. By the way, that iguana of Mikey's is uglier than Godzilla. Just thought I'd mention it. Love, Mom.
Dear Mom, you would never even have to see the iguana. I'll keep his cage in my room on the dresser next to my soccer trophies. Plus, he's so small, I bet you'll never even know he's there. Love and a zillion and one kisses, Alex.
Dear Alex, iguanas can grow to be over 6 feet long. You won't have enough space in your whole room, much less on your dresser, with or without your trophies. Love, Mom.
Dear Mom, it takes 15 years for an iguana to get that big. Mikey told me. I'll be married by then and probably living in my own house. Love, your smart and mature kid, Alex.
Dear Alex, how are you going to get a girl to marry you when you own a 6-foot-long reptile? Love, your concerned mother.
Dear Mom, forget the girl. I need a new friend now. This iguana can be the brother I've always wanted. Love, your lonely child, Alex.
Dear Alex, you have a brother. Love, Mom.
Dear Mom, I know I have a brother, but he's just a baby. What fun is that? If I had an iguana, I could teach it tricks and things. Ethan doesn't do tricks. He just burps. Love, grossed out Alex.
Dear Alex, how do I know you're ready for a pet? Remember what happened when you took home the class fish? Love, Mom.
Dear Mom, if I knew the fish was going to jump into the spaghetti sauce, I never would have taken the cover off the jar. Love, your son who has learned his lesson. P.S. Iguanas don't like spaghetti.
Dear Alex, let's say I let you have the iguana on a trial basis. What exactly would you do to take care of it? Love, Mom.
Dear Mom, I would feed him every day. He eats lettuce. And I would make sure he had enough water. And I would clean his cage when it got messy. Love, responsible Alex. P.S. What's a trial basis?
Dear Alex, a trial basis means Dad and I see how well you take care of him for a week or two before we decide if you can have him forever. Remember, Stinky and Lurch are waiting. Love, Mom. P.S. If you clean his cage as well as you clean your room, you're in trouble.
Dear Mom, I'll really try to clean my room and the iguana's cage. Also, listen to this. I'll pay for the lettuce with my allowance. I mean, how much can one baby iguana eat anyway? Love, Alex, the financial wizard.
Are you sure you want to do this, Alex?
Yes, Mom, I want an iguana, please.
Dear Alex, look on your dresser. Love, Mom.
Yes! Thank you, thank you.
It's the cutest story. Yeah, it's so cute. Well, thanks. So, Peter, talk through a little bit, because you do this so good with your students, of how you talk through these genres.
So when after we look at a mentor text, to start with, I do the sort of observing. I try to model observation for my students. So I will do things like, I will say, we can notice a lot of things about how letters could be written by looking at the ways that Alex and his mother craft their letters, right? And so we notice that it has some conventions that we expect, like the openings of, Dear Mom or Dear Alex and things, and the closings, intimate closings, love something, right? And we also notice that sometimes those are, the love is not enough. So we get, love and a zillion kisses,
Yes.
or love your responsible son, or love your financial wizard's son, or things like that. And then we notice things like the postscripts that show up in this, and if like the mothers, if you clean his cage as well as you clean your room, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And so ways that that the letter is these letters are crafted for. To provide a particular impact on the reader, right?
Yeah.
That it's always, the craft is always done in a way to help the reader understand something. And with this text is an interesting one because it's not only us as readers of the letters, but it's also the characters themselves are reading and responding to the letters. So it's sort of a meta letter exchange kind of a thing as well. We also think about the ways that that argument can be formed and the ways that we can learn from the things that Alex is doing as examples of the ways that people compel each other to do stuff. And so we do use some terms that, as we're talking about this, and we talk about like, when you would introduce these terms and help students to understand them, and when you would just sort of let them sort of implicitly understand versus explicitly. But we do talk about things like claim and evidence and warrants and counterclaims and rebuttals, and those show up so nicely within this particular text, right? Alex's continued claim that an iguana would be the ideal, companion for him, and his explanations for why his reasons make so much sense, right? You wouldn't even cost you anything because I would pay for it from my own allowance,
Yeah.
right? So
And
he has
using
all
the
these
mom
warrants.
as the counterclaim, students really understand, like, so what do I need? I have to imagine the audience and what they're going to argue with me, and then come up with my rebuttal. Is got a good element in that.
And so that give and take is so natural here, and it lets us see those elements of argument showing up within a children's book.
Yeah.
And we also talk about some of these sort of rhetorical terms like ethos, pathos, and logos, right? The use of emotion or of expertise or position, and use of logic or reasoning. And we talk about kairos too, this sort of sense that there are times when communication it's the right time to do a certain thing, right? And so Alex, the fact that Lurch, the dog, is waiting in sort of this impending doom on that poor iguana, helps to like situate the dialogue between his mother and himself in really particular ways. So we use these seemingly simplistic texts to talk about some pretty heady principles
Yeah.
about argument.
So we're going to invite you to do the same thing with another book, and some of you may know The Day the Crayons Quit, which I can rotate around. I love this book. It's a great book. Also letter writing genre, for those of you who know it, and the crayons make very compelling arguments about why Duncan needs to stop using so much red, because you're killing me. And so we're going to hand out some pages from the text and invite you to do the same kind of thing, like think through what are the elements of this text. I'm going to try to give different ones to different tables. We'll see if I can be this slick. So Peter, you talk while I hand out. How about
So you'll be getting some pages from this children's book, The Day the Crayons Quit. And so we want you to do the kinds of thing that I was just sort of talking through, which is try to read this like a writer would read it. So pay attention to some of the craft elements, the ways that that Drew Daywalt has like given voice to these crayons, the kinds of things that they happen to say. Also pay attention to like whether they are making an argument that you find compelling and what sorts of ways they're trying to make that argument. And different people at your table will have different texts. So read through it, think about yours, and then when you finish, then turn and start to talk to each other about what it is you're noticing. How are you like enacting this idea of reading like a writer? Okay, and I'll stop talking.
So let's just talk a little bit together about what you noticed. And we can pull up some of these pages so that we have them as kind of a reference. But what did you notice, even in terms of craft or in terms of argument or anything that floated your boat? Yeah, uppercase is in a lot of them, huh? Yeah, you have to.
What was it you said? Uppercase?
Yeah.
Yes. Red especially, right?
Yeah.
Fire engines, apples, everything red.
And completely losing it. Big.
Humpback whales.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
Also
No, yeah.
the way they describe, each friend describe himself. The way they describe themselves, the modifier, the very, very something friend, it
Yes.
really reflects on the personality
Yes.
from the letter.
Yeah. Your happy friend, your neat friend, your overworked friend, your tired friend. Yeah, yeah. Over there and over there too. Yeah. Yeah.
The different types of sentences, like there's questions, there's exclamation, there's like the punctuation, like there's ...
Yeah.
like all that stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be cool to talk about ellipses, which is kind of an underutilized punctuation sometimes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, underappreciated. That's on our list. Yeah.
A clear writer's voice, just with their humor. Just love the idea. They are obviously having fun with the craft and the writing. And we didn't, like we said, we didn't read the story, but we're assuming they got a lot of these ideas from the mentor text.
Yeah, and one of my favorites at the end of this book is the color peach is really upset that he's naked. He says, "Hey Duncan, it's me, Peach Crayon. Why did you peel off my paper wrapping? Now I'm, all caps, naked and too embarrassed to leave the crayon box. I don't even have any underwear. How would you like to go to school naked? I need some clothes. Help, your naked friend, Peach Crayon." Yeah, isn't that great? Yeah, I love it. And this is Duncan finally like taking the advice of the kids and like, oh, let me use more colors. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Totally. Yeah. Other things that you noticed? Yeah.
I noticed the structure of each of the 4 pages we had. It starts out with saying what was done, what they liked, the thing that was good, and then the thing that they didn't like, and then that plea at the end. Here's what I really need you to do. And it's kind of like our parent contacts. We really like your kid because of this. This is what they need you to do to improve. Please make sure that you do this.
That's great. That's awesome.
And they also gave evidence, you know. You colored the sun this color in this page and so on. So there was a lot of evidence, you know.
Yeah.
Or you have colored, used me too much or too little
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's orange and yellow
Yes.
talk about the pages where
Right?
they colored the sun.
Which is the sun supposed to be? Orange or yellow? Come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love baby penguins are gray, you know. So are tiny rocks, pebbles.
Right. the
good job.
the
Oh,
gray
okay.
does not have to be just humpback whales and elephants.
Yeah,
Come on.
exactly.
Throw me a
Yeah,
bone
it's
here.
good-
Give me a
good
stop.
evidence.
I think just with the kind of lists and getting them to consider sort of things that they may not have considered in their environments. This is the idea of personifying those things is so much fun.
Yeah.
And then I could see like these writing structures are for, this is for, maybe an upper elementary student or sixth grade, and maybe they're not allowed to color as much. And so I could totally see that this would be just such a fantastic, way to use their imagination and to mimic structure and kind of pull things out, but then kind of have that really fun, imaginative, coloring, visual image along with it.
Yeah, I would appreciate if you talk a little bit about, I had never noticed that before, that it's written in, yeah.
I just noticed that it was written, in handwriting, and each handwriting is different, which adds to the personification.
Yeah,
of the,
and that you could play with that too,
Yeah.
like how am I representing the idea of a character through the way that the font or something actually looks as a way to personify something would be cool. Yeah.
Right. We talk about that in terms of ethos, right?
Yeah.
That each crayon has its own ethos. It has an authority to speak about the use of red if it's red, right? Or the use of the gray, or, I'm so stubby now because you've used me so much I can't even see over the top rail of the crayon box. It's just, but that gives them that, we talk about that sense of having the ability to speak about something comes from being involved in the thing, and the crayons do that really well. So
Mary has a thing. Yeah.
Because I find I'm a secondary English language arts person with background, whatever. And this will work, and it's great for ELDs and ELs, second language, things of that nature. Do you give us resources that will kind of be more upper level for upper grades?
Yeah, and on our site there are a range of texts, although I will say Peter and I are big fans with our college students of using kids' picture books. Of using these books with our college students.
Oh, okay.
Like we might read something that's more argumentative, that's like a educational blog or something from Inside Higher Ed as a way to look at argument, but we're just as likely, these are the books we use with our college students. So that they can think about the elements to help them write more complicated argumentative text.
This speaks to more simplicity to then elevate the scaffold up.
Yep. Yeah.
and we do have we'll have a handout of some texts that are models for the ways that similar kinds of things can work in secondary stuff.
Yep,
So,
right there. Right.
For example, for college students, it's fine because you make the argument that this is just an example. But for example, for ELD students in high school where their identity is so involved, how do you, and I like that fact that saying this is just to teach you how to do this, and I'm going to take you to the next level, because I worry that sometimes, high school students are so sensitive, middle schools, that using lower level books might, it worries me a little bit. But
Yeah, right. And I totally, that makes sense to me, actually. Here you go. Yeah. And so we will,
Right. We talk about it actually. When we talk about it with our college students, right? We don't say that we're aiming this at you because this is the level you're at.
Yeah.
We're aiming this at you because this is good writing that we can use as a model for ourselves, and even if it's not the exact kind of thing that we write, they're making moves as writers to meet their audience's needs, right? And so they're writing for children, so they write it this way. We're writing it for adults, so we're going to pitch it in a different way, but we might be able to still use the same kind of, we might use exasperation effectively in our writing sometimes, right? We might use the use of, use something like evidence of, I'm doing most of the work here, Kim, and you're, but we can do that sort of thing where we're using the same kind of principle, but applying it in a way that's not this way. So we always talk about the audience for it as being not you, but you can still enjoy it and see it. So so that's the way that we think about it that way.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to Paul Hankins, who's a teacher in Kentucky, who his high school students read a lot of children's books and write reviews and use them to think about these elements that he's trying to teach them. I will put it on the bottom of the slide. Yeah, of course. Yep. So we're going to invite you to do this.
We want you to go back to the list that you made earlier of things that are underappreciated in your life. And we invite you to give those things a voice in the same way that the crayons acquired a voice and were able to communicate the things that satisfy them, but the things that frustrate them, the things that they have to say. So Kim started this by saying that oftentimes we as teachers specify everything, right? So what we're going to specify here is some of the things. We want you to play with the letter writing form. So we want you to maintain that letter writing thing. But the voice that you choose to, the object you choose to give voice to is completely up to you. So is the audience, right? Those crayons were writing to Duncan. Who's your thing writing to? Is the thing writing to you? Is it writing to your significant other? Is it writing to somebody else? You get to sort of choose who it is that you're going to get, your object is going to, address through this letter, okay? So you have markers and things at your table. You have this nice little book to make. See what you can come up with. Write your letter. There's colored pencils up here and things.
And here's one of the things I like about this very simple thing, and Katie Wood-Ray talks about it in her book. This is just stapling the pages together helps kids write. This is actually really hard to look at a blank map out of this. This is hard. This staring at you, or a blank Google Doc. Even little kids get what a book is. And when you give them pages stapled together, they seem to I know what to do here. Pictures, some words, and all of a sudden they're making books in volume, they're writing more than you can imagine. And it happens in our college class too. All of a sudden they're like, I gotta write my whole story. So a simple thing like stapling the pages together, we have found can help. Yeah.
And one of my current students came back to class. We've only been in class for, this is the fourth week or whatever, but she came back. She's an aide in a TK class and after school program thing. And so she said, I tried this stapled books with the kids and they just ate it up. And she goes, and it was crazy. They knew how to make a cover without me telling them anything. And they wrote, and then they were really shy about sharing. But once the first one did, then they all just clamored to share their stories in these little books. So the little books have a real utility to them. Plus they're finite, right? It's not like, you're not going to have to write Moby Dick when you have this to work with. Yeah. So we invite you to be playful, to experiment, to take a risk, to be silly, to have some fun, to talk to each other, to share these I just came up with the funniest thing I just wrote. Oh my God.
And we left some time. We were really thinking a good 15 or so minutes to you can write a book in 15 minutes. Maybe. Yeah. So, throw some colleague under the bus that did a good job and tell them to share. We're hoping maybe you got this. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna do a little sharing because we're gonna run out of time as you always do. Is it on? Good job.
Okay.
Mine
was called Wire Hanger.
You ready? We're sharing.
It's a picture of a hanger holding an old coat, and it says, "This is me holding up that coat you never wear." Dear Anne, I've worked tirelessly for you the past 20 years, as I think you know if you stop to think about it. I say tirelessly, but actually I'm tired. My poor shoulders are beginning to droop, and my hand is cramped. You know, when a person has to hold onto a pole for 20 years without a break, her hand gets stiff and starts to hurt. I need a vacation. Please give this ratty old coat away. Sincerely, your faithful wire hanger.
Great. That was good. Yeah. Someone else? Okay, you got what I call thrown under the bus. Yeah. Wait, is it on? Let's see.
Am I? Yeah.
Yes.
We're good. I don't have a title for mine, but I use the format of the writing letters back and forth. It says, "Dear Time, I appreciate your unchanging nature. Thank you for all your consistency. However, I need to remind you that while you continually move forward, not everything else can keep up. Sometimes I just need motion to stop so that I can be appreciated. Sincerely, Precious Moments. Dear Miss Moments, I understand that you can be special. However, things are only special because they cannot always last. If I were to stop, you would no longer be precious. Time. Dear Time, it's not that I need to be special, it's just that everything else is so limited. A snowflake on the tongue, a child's first steps, the rainbow after the storm. If you could just slow down or pause, it would help out the rest of us. Sincerely, Temporary Moments. Dear Mr. Moments, today, like every day from now until infinity, I will continue to make progress. What I suggest you do to deal with this fact is to control your own destiny and change your own momentum. Time. Dear Time, thank you for your suggestion. If you are unwilling to change, then I have no recourse but to stop and smell the roses. Sincerely, making lasting moments.
Oh, nice job. Yeah. Bravo. That was awesome. We're going to do that thing where, you're all tired and you should get to, if you imbibe, should get to have a cocktail. So, yeah, somebody is. Peter did hand out, back to this question of mentor texts for older kids or for high school kids. These are really nice. The blue sheet that you just put on your table is a really great resource.
So these were Newsweek for, I think, since 1972 until their demise last year. With each issue, they had a column that was called My Turn, where just ordinary folks would write in about something that concerned them. What's interesting about them is that they generally had three components to them. They had some sort of a storytelling thing that would orient the reader to an issue, a problem, a concern. They would have an informative aspect where they would talk about some particular thing. They might cite some statistics or even reference laws or other kinds of things like that. And then the third thing they would try to do is try to compel the readers to take some sort of action in response to the situation that they provide for you. And so they do that sort of melding of the narrative and expository and argumentative components, but do it in a very personalized way that is compelling. And they were writing it for a real general audience. They wanted people to hear their voice, take up their cause in some way, believe in the legitimacy or validity of it. So I just printed a couple of them off here. One of them has basketball become hockey on hardwood, and the other one, how I became a legal citizen. So one of them, the hockey on hardwood one, is just by some guy, Robert Connor, right? The one, the how I became a legal citizen, Maria Andrew is a young adult novelist. So she has a book called The Other Side of Empty that really is a novelization of the really compact version of her story here. That's really quite compelling. But these have been used by colleagues of ours in the Northern California Writing Project. One of the schools that we work with, Corning Union High School in Corning, the olive capital of probably the world or something, I don't know, California anyway. They do My Turns with their freshmen, and they compile books of them every year. So the part that's missing from these two is there's usually an actual shot of the author and then like a sort of action picture, some picture that captures some element of the thing. And so they use those elements as well within the books that they publish, and they collect them and they have them, every year. They have, I think, since I'm going to say probably the early 2000s, they've been doing that. And so they have these huge collections every year of things that the freshmen come into the school concerned about that they want to share with others through telling their story, doing some research, and presenting a call to action. So it's not unlike what the crayons are doing for Duncan here. It's the same sorts of moves that are being asked, but using a mentor text that's a actual public document that was shared with a really wide audience. So I hope that can be a kind of helpful way to sort of think, because there's lots and lots of things, op-ed pieces, all sorts of places where you find people who are telling stories and providing information as ways to help make an argument. And those are real texts that are written for an actual audience that can help our students understand, if they read it from a writer's perspective, how to make the same kind of moves themselves, right? Without having to rely on a formula. It's actually like it's generated because they notice that it worked on them, and that they can then sort of give it a try themselves. I'm going to run out of time, sorry. But I equate this is very much like my middle son went through a skateboarding phase, and what he always wanted to do was go to the skate park and then watch the guys that were better than him and try to imitate them, right? And that's the move that we do when we learn something, and we want writers to have that always in their pocket. That's why that quote up at the Katie Wood Ray at the quote at the start is about having this identity of reading like a writer, because that will always get you through a situation. If you can read like a writer, you can see the way that other people have written in this context for these purposes, under these circumstances, and for these audiences. And you can try that same kind of a thing yourself. Yeah. It's really an empowering move for people to sort of take that up as an identity.
Yeah, and my colleague Leslie, who's a physicist that I write with a lot, would say that all the structures in the world won't help if you don't have anything to say. So sometimes you don't have a topic sentence not because you don't understand what a topic sentence is, but because you don't have an idea for a topic sentence. And our job, of course, as educators is to curate the interest and the space where they can have something to say and someone to say it to. And then the structures emerge from those two elements. What do I want to say and who do I want to say it to? And using mentor text. Links to all kinds of the resources that we talked about today, and they put the links to these slides on the conference stuff. And you can always, under that Kim Jackson's website, always has the links to this and all these resources too. So if you're in doubt, you could just Kim Jackson, and then you'll find the website. Thank you so much for taking this up. Like, we're very grateful that you wrote things and talked to each other, because it would have really sucked if you didn't. So thank you for doing that, and have a good rest of the evening. Yeah, thanks. Good.